welcome to this episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Olson, Managing Director of Cornerstone International Alliance. This is the place where I'm lucky enough to talk with the experts in the M&A world focused on the lower middle market, and we can have a conversation about topics that can help you level up your M&A firm. So today's guest I'm really excited about. He's got a laundry list of credentials: a lawyer, corporate executive, transition mediator, M&A advisor for many years, and has been a buyer, seller, and entrepreneur himself. He's been in the industry for over 30 years, and he has been an author of a book called Home Run: A Pro's Guide to Selling Your Business. He writes an amazing weekly blog that really gives great insights into the M&A world. He is a founding member of Cornerstone International Alliance. He is also a founding board member for our alliance, and I'm really honored to have Jim Cumbee join me today. Hey, Jim.
Did you say I had a lot of dirty laundry? Is that what you said?
Did I say that? I didn't mean to. I thought I said a laundry list of credentials.
No, okay, laundry list. Okay. Yeah.
Well, welcome, Jim. I appreciate you joining me today.
Thanks, Nick.
And like I said, this is the place where I bring in experts like yourself, and we hit on a topic and kind of dive deep into, your experiences and how it's gone for you. So, one thing I always you should trademark this phrase because I love it so much. When we're talking in our meetings and our mastermind sessions, and we're bringing on new members, as looking at bringing them on, and how everyone's so different. You coin yourself as a solopreneur. What is that? Why don't you give us some of your insights on what that means?
I didn't invent that phrase. I mean that comes from a book I read somewhere years ago. Solopreneur. I guess that it's kind of a combination. I'm an entrepreneur that works by himself or herself. I'm a solopreneur. Maybe not by. I think when I started doing this, Nick, I didn't assume I was going to be a solopreneur, but over time I've become one. But that's a business owner that works by himself.
Mm-hmm. So I guess what's led you to give us the history of, kind of where you started and where you are today, and, what path you took to become, a solopreneur in the M&A world.
Well, actually, there's a reason I'm a solopreneur. It didn't happen by accident. I went to law school, always wanted to be a lawyer. I practiced law for a short period. Didn't love it. So I decided to kind of do a bit of a career change. So I went to business school, and I got to business school, and I had not had any business training in college. All of my college was focused on going to law school. I studied history, political science, English, liberal arts, how to write, how to read, all skills I thought would train me for, a career in law. And then fast forward a few years, I got to business school, and I go, oh, I don't know any of this stuff. But when I got to business school, I just completely loved it. I was behind in a lot of ways, but I think because I loved it so much, I was able to catch up pretty quickly and really realized I wanted to be in business, not in the law. Now, having said that, I'm still a member of the Missouri Bar. I don't practice law. In fact, when in my engagements, I make it very clear I am not your lawyer. You will retain a lawyer, but I'll help you do that. I'll work alongside the lawyer, and I love that part of what I do. But I'm not practicing law today. After law school, as I said, I ended up in business school. After business school, I ended up in Orlando, did real estate and development there for a period, and then went to work for the Walt Disney Company in the early 90s when Disney was really ramping up their real estate development in Orlando to develop their non-theme park assets. Was involved in the launch of Celebration, the Disney Institute, Disney Vacation Club, and some other kind of non-theme park businesses. Really loved that work. I love the people. I love the Walt Disney Company. Even to this day, I still miss the Disney Company, but I really wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I bought a radio business in Nashville, which is a whole other story how that happened, and bought a business in bankruptcy, basically, and It's always better to be lucky than good, because a couple of years after buying I bought 3 radio stations and a radio network, a satellite network. A couple of years after buying these stations in bankruptcy, Congress deregulated radio ownership, and the laws of supply and demand kicked in, and my station value skyrocketed. So I was able to sell the stations 4 years after I bought them to a publicly traded radio company, Salem Communications. And I went to work for Salem, kind of running their non-radio businesses, digital businesses, publishing, internet, software. And through that work, I got involved in M&A, doing a lot of acquisitions. We were building up that line of businesses through acquisition, not through organic growth. And did that for 9 years, and really loved Salem, loved the company, loved the values of the company. But when the recession hit, they didn't need me anymore, and I didn't really like managing people the way I had kind of grown into, because we'd make acquisitions, they fell under me, and I had a lot of people I was responsible for. It just kind of wasn't what I was suited to do. So I started my practice in 2009 to kind of be a solo practitioner consultant. And that's kind of how I morphed into being a solopreneur. It wasn't something I saw too far in advance coming. But when I decided to go out on my own, I also made the decision I didn't want to manage a lot of people. I had done that. I didn't feel I was all that good at it, frankly. And I can manage myself pretty well, and I like the work. So that's kind of how I've become a solopreneur.
Jim, that was a very rich history and unique way to get to where you're at today. So I appreciate you diving into that.
Mm-hmm.
Who wouldn't love working for Walt Disney, right?
Yeah, great company. I still follow it to this day. All the people I worked with are gone. All the leadership, of course, is gone. But yeah, it's a fun company to have in your background. You can probably look behind my desk and see some Disney paraphernalia even to this day, still kind of part of my heart and soul.
Yeah, right. So as a solopreneur, I would imagine it comes with some benefits and some challenges. Like, what do you see as your advantages by working and kind of being, your own boss and your own employees?
Well, you look at advantages and disadvantages. I guess you could say that from a personal perspective as well as from a client perspective. There's advantages and disadvantages. From a personal perspective, I guess I feel like I've only got so much bandwidth, mental bandwidth, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
and that I can dedicate to work. And, I like to dedicate that bandwidth to my clients and the work I'm doing. And I'm kind of constantly thinking about where to go here, what to do next there, thinking about my clients. I don't have to put any bandwidth toward other people. And that sounds kind of selfish. And I don't think I really mean it to be selfish. It's just a choice I've made, how to allocate what kind of mental capacity I might have. Is I allocate it toward my clients. The disadvantages is, there are times when, I want to think through something, have somebody to talk to, and, just say, am I thinking about this right? I'm a great value of coaching. Tiger Woods to this day still has a coach, so to say, hey, did I handle that correctly? Did I do that right? I value that, and I don't have that. And I think, it's a real key benefit to me of being part of the Cornerstone International Alliance, that I've got people like you and Scott and Bob and Mike, and I could go on and on and on, Sarah, the folks that I have met that I just like a lot and like being around, and to say, am I thinking about this right? So I go to meetings and hear their feedback and get their perspective. So I think if you're going to be a solopreneur in any endeavor, search out organizations that you can be a part of where you can get some feedback and some help along the way, some perspective. Now, from a client perspective, the advantage of being a solopreneur is I look a client in the eye and say, listen, if you hire me, you're hiring me. I'm going to be the person by your side, good, bad, or otherwise. I'm not out kind of trying to drum up business to push through a pipeline. Um, some clients, I presumably find that an advantage. Some clients may go, I'm not sure I want to work with this guy. So the advantage to a client is they know when they retain me, and they retain, me on a kind of a 24/7 basis. The downside to retaining me is I get busy and I have to sometimes kind of manage workflows. I've got a client now that retained me about a month ago, and I was just kind of going into the final stages of a closing and had my brain was sort of focused there. So I really couldn't give him a whole lot of attention. But I try to be real honest with my clients and kind of tell them where I am in my flow of business and what's going on. So that's the advantage and disadvantage from a client standpoint of being a
Mhm.
solopreneur.
Yeah, I mean, you're very right. Even from a client and from a personal perspective, I appreciate those insights. And I got to imagine, the deal process is long. It's got a lot of different stages, a lot of different components to it. I would imagine that you would agree with me that you being involved in each stage of the deal only helps you and best serve your client and best, finding the best buyer for your client. What are your thoughts on being part of, the entire process from, you know, document creation, buyers list creation, due diligence, management meetings, all that sort of stuff.
Well, I'm not sure how you could do it otherwise. I know a lot of firms are centered around, you got one group that's kind of focused on business development and getting the clients, then you turn that over to a group of analysts or junior folks to kind of run the process, and then the senior folks kind of get back involved when it gets really kind of dicey. You know, it kind of goes back to what I said. Whenever a client, considers me for an engagement, I say, listen, I'm going to be the guy by your side for better or for worse throughout the entire process. And I do think there is a bit of history that I, come to the table with, um, you know, that, the deal history with a particular client. I can kind of, maybe put pieces together because I've been involved in every phase of a transaction. But so in that sense, it's all I've known. So I can't really compare it to a different model other than what I've observed. And based on what I've
Yeah.
observed, I'm not sure how well if that really serves a client interest all that well.
hmm Yeah. I mean, yeah, to me, it just naturally makes a lot of sense that the more you're
Now,
involved, the
what
more
I
you
will say,
know,
Nick,
right?
I will say in uh, as a knock on that is, and I tell my clients this to say, listen, I may not be the fastest guy to run your deal from beginning to end. I don't have an infrastructure of people behind me that can take what I do and run with it and blow through a process. Um, and so if speed is your objective, I may not be your guy. Now, um, I think I can hold my own against any process that may be run by any firm, but I sometimes just have to manage when I start and stop things just based on my workloads. But um, most clients that have hired me have not been in the I got to get to market, I got to do a transaction. Speed's my objective. Yeah, let's go. But I do want to be clear about that. That is an issue, and if that's an objective if speed is an objective, I may not be the right guy.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like you set those expectations up front, which is probably important. And so you and your client are on the same page
Mhm.
on what to expect and how long it's going to take. And I mean, essentially, you're going to be working together for 6, 12 months, right?
Well, it's funny you say that because I'll actually say to my client, listen, and I would always kind of preface it and say, look, I don't want you to respond to this right now. I just want you to think about something. You really better think about whether you like me or not, because you're going to be seeing me, hearing from me a lot. Um, and it's true. I mean, it's just a true statement. Um, so I just finished a transaction a couple of weeks ago, and the guy hired me when we started about a year ago. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're on the phone all the time. You're emailing all the time. You're talking all the time. I know his wife well. I've got to know his kids. I mean, it's it really is a relationship business, and
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. How do you, how do you manage that up front? Because I gotta imagine at some point you have to figure out if your personalities work together, you feel like you can be successful. You are spending so much time together. Like, how do you, figure that out on the front end before you get too deep and figure out like, yeah, this just isn't going to work. We're not, connecting well on a on a personality or personal level.
yeah, that's a really good question, and I don't know that I've got a silver bullet answer. I guess the best barometer for that is valuation. That if I look at a company and say, I really think I can sell this company for $15 million, and the client's going, well, I think it's worth 25, or I've got a friend that sold his for 25, and that if that's such an important factor in the decision. And by the way, I should make it clear. I don't let a client hire me until we have consensus on valuation.
Yeah.
So that and I've never really thought about it until you asked the question, but I think that's probably my barometer for if I
Mhm.
can really work with somebody, if they're reasonable on valuation, if they because it's the number one, are their expectations reasonable? But number two, are they malleable in their thinking? If I say to a client, I think your business is worth $15 million, and if he or she says, well, I was hoping for 20, why do you say 15? And then if they go, okay, well that makes sense, then you kind of know you can communicate, you can move them, you can have some back and forth with them.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of become my barometer. If somebody's just really difficult about their expectation,
Yeah.
doesn't want feedback. I've got a guy in mind, by the way. I'm not going to use his name, but I mean, I've got a guy in mind that I met with a couple of weeks ago, and you just sort of know this guy doesn't. He's going to be trying to tell me how to do my work the whole time. He's got his expectations set. It
Hmm.
just doesn't feel right. So
Yeah.
you're asking me a question that's got a very squishy answer, but it's kind of like it's kind of like you know it when you see it kind of thing. It's hard
Right.
to define in advance.
Yeah. And you got to do that on the front end too, because like you don't want to get too deep into that. But, I think you hit on it where, nail on the head with you gotta have a collaborative, relationship because
Right,
if you're putting your stake in the ground here and your clients putting their stake in the ground here and it's not connected, it's just going to be a challenge throughout the
right,
whole thing. And like you said, you might be here, but you go through the process and you might get closer to that 20 million, but he or she's willing to give a little bit too, and just that collaborative, hey, we're going at this together. It's not, I am on
right,
your team, right? I want to get you the best value possible, but let's manage expectations.
right, right.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about so far, you being a solopreneur. I find this very interesting that in the M&A world, I don't know if it's the same. I think it's more of a lower middle market thing in my opinion, but I might be wrong. Um, we have 26 firms currently in our alliance, and I've gotten to know all of them very well and understand their structures very and how they run their firms very well. And we have 26 different ways to run an M&A firm. And they're all successful, which is the great thing and the funny thing to me that you can have all these different ways of doing the same thing essentially. Why do you think that is, or what are your thoughts on that as to how that works?
Well, it's interesting. It may be the nature of consulting. There is no one model for how consulting works. And at the core, what we do, we're consultants, and we get paid on a success fee basis, but we're consultants.
Hmm.
So I think if you just look at consulting as an industry and go, there are thousands of different ways to make consulting work. So I think it just may be endemic to the nature of the kind of work we do, which is consulting, business owners through a process.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that makes total sense. Um, and so. One thing we talk to a lot about within our group is, how to stay top of mind relevant. How are you generating leads? How are you letting people out in the world know about you and what you do? Um, what are some ways that, I mean, like you mentioned before, you only have so much mental capacity, so much time in a day. And a lot of that time gets focused on your clients. But I think you do a really good job of managing your business development efforts, making sure that you are staying top of mind, you are providing good content for your network. How do you manage the time and how do you do that so well?
Well, thank you. I'm not sure I agree with you that I do it well, but you know, when I came out of business school, my first boss, I said earlier, I was in real estate development. I worked for a company called Trammell Crow Company. And if you know anything about the real estate development industry, Trammell Crow is just a mythical figure, wonderful man. He's passed away. In fact, when I worked with him, even he was in his 70s back in the 80s. And he's now the second, third generation to join the company, but a wonderful guy. And he was one of these guys who just would just say these incredibly insightful things. You just kind of wanted to be around him because he would just say these really, things that just little gems. He said to us one time, I think it was at a conference, he said, luck is being at the right place at the right time. So go get it in a lot of places.
Mm,
And I'm telling you, Nick, I mean, that was almost 40 years ago when I heard Trammell say that. And I kind of go, gosh, a lot of my success in life has just been in the right place at the right time. You have to be attentive. You got to be thinking. You've got to be, ready to kind of receive information. But so under that premise, being a solopreneur, I by definition, I can't be in a lot of places. So that's where you kind of go, well, you can leverage yourself through digital activities. So I've always enjoyed writing. So I started writing a blog, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago.
mm,
And so I put out a regular blog. It goes to, several hundred people, kind of in the Nashville, community. And I've got friends around the country that read it. And then I post that blog on LinkedIn regularly. And that kind of opens up kind of a whole nother avenue of people. So I have found then I'm involved in Nashville in some professional organizations and some
mm.
nonprofits, and so I'm kind of in the community pretty actively. I just found it just kind of being out there. I remember I got a call one day from a lawyer here in town, a guy who runs a pretty large law firm, and he said, "Hey Jim, I just got your blog this morning." He didn't say he read it. He said, I just saw your blog. I just saw your blog. And it made me think my mother-in-law has a business. And so that, I mean, it was just like he was thinking about his mother-in-law's business. He sees my blog and he calls me. I mean, so,
Yeah.
uh, I had I had a call um, a couple of months ago from a guy I went to business school with. And I graduated from business school 40 years ago. And he and I have stayed connected on LinkedIn, but we have, we don't see each other. He's in California and I'm here. And he called me and said, "Hey, my uncle owns a business in Memphis, and he and I were just talking over the holidays about he wants to sell it. Maybe you could help him." So, how do you how do you plan for that? You just it just totally um, um, you know kind of top of mind awareness. I think the key, if you're going to be in the digital outreach business, is to provide useful information. My blogs are always stories I've heard, situations I've encountered. I
Yeah.
changed the names, I changed the fact pattern so as to not embarrass anyone or identify one. But I try to just provide content about how M&A works, how business ownership works, funny things I've heard from a business owner, lessons learned. So just trying to be out there and be active and be credible. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, there's no secret to it. I think beyond just being credible.
Credible, yeah. I mean, you got to provide value, but I also think, and the one thing that you do well is consistency. Um, if your ebbs and flows on when you're putting out content, then you're not going to necessarily, people aren't going to look for it. Like every Tuesday, every week, I'm going to go make sure I go read Jim's blog.
Yeah.
They know that it's coming out. They're going to go do that. And so I think that's important. And you and I have a common denominator in the content creation space, and you and I have both worked with the group based out of Nashville, right? Brand Builders Group.
Mhm.
And the thing that I've learned, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on like one of the top takeaway or two that you've gotten that's helped your firm, is exactly that. You got to create content to stay relevant, to provide value, and you got to be consistent with it. But you also have to have a concise message. I think that's one of the biggest things. Like you got to know who you are. You got to know
Mhm.
what you're good at and what you're not good at, and speak to your strengths, right? And if you have that, provide that consistent message, you're gonna be looked at as a thought leader, and you're gonna, the constant amount of content you're putting out there, like you said, you can't plan for it. Well, the only way you can plan for it is being consistent and constantly putting out good content, because one day that person is going to open up your email
Right.
and be like, I remember Jim, I'm going to call him because my mother-in-law
Right.
is just
Right.
like that's how it works, and that's how you
Yeah,
do it.
no, I was talking to my mother-in-law last night, and then
Yeah,
the next morning he sees my email. I mean, you again,
yeah,
it's trammel crow. Luck is being in the right place at the right time, so we'll get in a lot of places.
yeah, yep, exactly, exactly. But yeah, I think when you don't put out your content, I mean, I think you're only doing yourself and your company a disservice. I mean, we all in this industry, I think, are, as a whole, are very smart, intelligent, really good business people.
Mhm.
And so,
Mhm.
not why not put that knowledge you have in your head and share it with your network, and that'll
Right.
only help you out and kind of coming up with those situations that you may not have had if you didn't put that content out. So I think that's
What's
just
funny
never
though,
know.
I've never done this, but maybe someday when I retire and have a lot of time on my hands, I'll do this. If you go back and look at, I don't know, several hundred blogs I've written over 6 or 7 years, I bet you at the end of the day, there's probably only 4 or 5 problems. And
Mhm.
they all kind of have different permutations, different characters, but they're really only 4 or 5 issues. And
Right.
and if you can really kind of get a handle around what those are, because I'm in a stage of my life, maybe it's just an age thing, where a business owner will start to lay out their problem or their situation, and not long before I'm going to go, yeah, I've seen this, yeah, I've heard that, yeah, 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 oh yeah, and they always think it's them. I'm the only one who's ever suffered this. I've only have been in this
Yeah.
situation, but almost invariably, I go, yeah, I've seen that before. I've seen and some of the fact patterns that help me solve a problem before will help me solve another problem in a different set of fact patterns. But at the core, the issues are remarkably consistent. The problems are
Mhm.
remarkably consistent.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, and I just want to say kudos to you because I think you do it the right way as far as content goes, and it is important. So, I always, look at your stuff and be like, oh, I can, we can do something similar. I like how we did that, or we can share it on LinkedIn. Like just and that really is what's nice about our group is, you put out these amazing blogs, we share it in our own networks, and your content gets put out to all these other people that
Sure,
maybe you didn't have, or
sure, sure.
if you weren't part of a group like this. And so I think that's also the power of the alliance that we've built is we got really good M&A firms in our group that do it the right way, and we work together and share each other's stuff. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah, you gotta be. You want to have people in your alliance that are givers, not all takers. People that
Correct.
are open to ideas, people that are willing to share.
Hmm.
So that's key. And by the way, just professionally, that's the kind of people you want to be around anyway. Are
Hmm.
people that are givers and not just takers.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, and just talking about the industry in general. I mean, you're pitching a client. I want to take kind of a little left hand turn here. You're pitching a client, and we're explaining what you do, and how you help them. Like, how do you describe that to your clients, and to try to sell your services a little bit, because and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of the business owners that we work with might not be ready, or might not know that they need someone to represent them in a sale of a business. So I guess, how do you make them aware of what you do and what we all do?
Well, I may even take exception with the question. I think in most cases, business owners will call somebody like me or any M&A firm,
Mm,
um, when they're generally ready to do something. Now they may not, their business may not be ready to do what they want to do, but
Yeah,
they're
right.
generally calling for a reason. I've compared what we do to like wedding planners. I mean,
Yeah,
you don't need a wedding planner until you need a wedding planner, or a mortician. I mean, you can, pick your metaphor, but
yeah.
um, now, as I said, a lot of times business owners, I've got a call this afternoon with a business owner to say your business isn't ready to be sold. I mean, you called me initially because you want to sell your business, um,
Mhm.
but it's not ready to be sold. I had lunch with two ladies last week at a really nice business here, but kind of given the growth trend they're on, they're really better off to wait 2 years to sell.
Mhm.
Um, and what you want to do is provide quality advice. I think a lot of M&A people would say, "Hell, I'll go to market. Yeah, let's go. We can take you, and I can sell you, and it's all going to be great, and you got a good business." Uh, but I was able to sit down with them and say, "Listen, you got a business now that could be sold, but if you wait 2 years, based on the growth trend I'm seeing and what you're telling me, I think your business will be worth X,
Yeah.
X more than you're selling for now." So
Mhm.
I think just being able to provide quality, advice that really gets to help them think strategically about their future is what business owners are really needing. And like I said, if the business owner doesn't want that, then I'm probably not the right guy for them.
Yeah. No, and I think on some level, they gotta, your clients have to appreciate the fact that, you're not in it just to make another sale. You're in it to do what's best by them. Like you said, if you're telling someone to wait 2 years, that's 2 years down the road that, you're waiting on, selling the business
Yeah.
and getting your commission. And
No,
so,
I
I
mean,
mean,
I've actually said, if you're going through a process looking at other business brokers or other M&A advisors, don't pick somebody that needs the money more than you do.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Very good advice. Very good advice there. Um, so, you know, what would your advice be? I guess twofold. Someone, I guess I'll answer the question first. Who's looking to get into the M&A industry, brand new, like what would your advice to them be as to maybe, what they're in for, what they need to do to set themselves up for success?
Well, I had that conversation a lot, as you might imagine. Um, Now, I don't know if you can tell on the video, but I've got a fair amount of white hair, so which means I've been around a while. Um, I was able to start my practice in 2009 on my own because I had run an M&A group, basically run M&A for 9 years uh, for a publicly traded company,
Hmm.
or doing a lot of M&A, let's say. So I really had a lot of experience in the space. So if you're starting, you really better start with a lot of experience, um, or have a mentor who can really train you to have, to learn. Too often people, I see all the time people, business owners that sell a business and then say, "Well, I've sold a business, therefore I know how business brokerage works." Well, no, that's not even remotely right. I had an appendectomy a few weeks ago. I'm not ready to start doing appendectomies just because I had one. So I think you really have to, if you find an organization that you can really be mentored by someone who knows how the process works and who has patience to train. The second thing is this is a this is really a long sales cycle, and a long the sales cycle is long and the process is long.
Hmm.
So I had coffee a few months ago with a really sharp guy in early 40s trying to think about business brokerage, and I
Hmm.
said, if you can comfortably handle 2 years of no income, this may be something you want to do. And I say
Hmm.
comfortable. I mean, you really have to be not impatient, not jittery, not always looking over your shoulder. Really be comfortable. I've got 2 year runway, and by the way, be able to invest some money to kind of do it right. Buy the tools that you need, and invest in the services, the databases and all that you really do need to do this well. and establishing a presence. So it's that combination of factors makes it pretty rare the number of folks that can come in and really be successful over time.
Yeah.
So a mentor, have the benefit of time, and have ice water in your veins, because it's even when you get into the cycle, you get a client and you're selling the company, things can go wrong and things can break down. One of my best references over the years were a company I sold. It's about 6 years ago. Two brothers. It was a large transaction being bought by a publicly traded company, and we were having issues kind of toward the end on working capital, I believe. But it was really got contentious and difficult, and we had a real heart to heart conversation, and I advised him to walk. I said, I think the best way to push this envelope is to tell the buyer, no, we're not doing this deal. We're standing firm.
Mm-hmm.
And we did that. And guess what? The buyer gave in and we got what we wanted and we got the deal closed. And they said, Jim, the fact that you were willing to advise us to walk away from the transaction, we were still going to have the company. They were doing fine, but I was going to walk away with zero. They said the fact that you gave us that quality of advice that, put us at the top of the list of people that, when you want to give a reference, put us at the top of the list.
Yeah.
And that's, I got to tell you, Nick, that was hard to do. I look back in that and I remember saying, what am I doing? It's just, but it was the right advice. It got us over the hump. We got the deal closed. But I'm telling you, that's tough but you've got to be able to do that, to look yourself in the mirror and to give clients the quality advice that they really deserve.
Right. Right. Like you said, you're doing right by them. You don't have to have the sale to quote unquote survive. So,
Mm-hmm.
that's definitely a good thing for your clients as well.
Mm-hmm.
What, if you were to give also advice to someone who wants to follow your path and be a solopreneur in the M&A world, what would your advice be to them?
Well, like I said, you have to know how this works. I mean, you have to kind of know how to find buyers, and how to kind of work through a process. Now, I think that the first decision you would make is to say, listen, do you want to be a Main Street broker, or do you want to kind of do lower middle market work? The entry point for each of those is very different. How you do the process is very different. So I think the first thing I would say is, if you're kind of starting from scratch, maybe you're coming out of a corporate job, you don't like your corporate job, you're thinking about, I'm going to make a career move. I'd say, go to a M&A Source conference, go to an IBBA conference, just kind of walk around, meet people, go to seminars. That's kind of a good starting point. And then having a mentor, I think, is just critical. A mentor or a firm you can join that can help you, kind of be a part of their process, or you join a process that's already working.
Mm-hmm.
I think would be a good thing. And then maybe over time become a solopreneur. I think, Nick, I think the doing it the way I did is such a unicorn because I was older, because I had a lot of experience in M&A, because I had, a law degree and an MBA. I mean, I just brought a lot to the table that I think gave me a confidence level, if nothing else, that I really knew what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I didn't always know what I was doing, but I kind of had confidence that I could get myself through it. I just think being a solopreneur is a tough way of doing this without having laid the foundation, I guess is what I'm saying.
Right. Right. That was very good advice. It makes total sense because if you don't have that foundation, you might be, struggling or setting yourself up for failure, and
Or
maybe.
you end up giving bad advice. You just end up giving lousy advice,
Good point.
and you're going to fail. You're going to fail. if you give bad advice. Just the law of the universe will kick in and crush you if you give bad advice to people.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Jim, no, I really appreciate your time and your insights. I think I learned, you and I talk often, and I even learned
Mhm.
some new things today, and I really appreciate it. I know our audience will definitely take away some key value propositions from our discussion today, and really appreciate you joining me.
Well, Nick, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you and our friendship, professional and personal, and the friendships we've been able to build together through the Cornerstone International Alliance. Well, I'll just say this though. I mean, I don't. I'm not trying to hear. I'm not here to tell anybody that I've got it figured out. That go replicate my model. This is how you do it. This is all a work in progress. And I frankly think that's one of the reasons I like it because,
Yeah.
I mean, every transaction is different. Although some, like I said earlier, the problems tend to kind of show up and be similar, but every transaction is different. Every client is different. I mean, it's a complete work in progress. I'm not creating widgets here.
Right.
So I feel like I'm learning every day. So I don't want people to hear this and go, "This is a guy who thinks he's got it all figured out," because I don't. But I enjoy the process of figuring it out, and I enjoy being around people that are open to the process of figuring it out, like our friends in the alliance. So,
Yeah.
um, you know, I uh, don't take anything I've said too literally. It's just I'm just one guy that's
Well,
swimming
no,
out there and trying to do his best.
yeah, no, and I think that's really what this podcast is for, and I think that's really the foundation in which we created Cornerstone International Alliance was, we call it a judgment-free zone, right? Like you're
Mm-hmm.
saying this works for you, and I might say, this is how I did that same thing, and someone else might say the same thing, and as you're listening, you're taking little bits and pieces you're just consuming all this information.
Yeah,
It's not
absolutely.
making it work for you and in your own practice. And I don't think anybody in our group would say, oh, Jim's doing it this way. He says we should do it. Like there's none of that within our group.
No,
It's all like
no,
we're all doing it a little differently. We all have our processes. We're
yeah.
all, smart enough to be like, okay, I can take that and that would work for me. But that
Mm-hmm.
person said, nah, that really wouldn't work for my firm. So, just kind of take those bits and pieces and implement for your own, you know,
Right.
practices and how you do things.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so again, appreciate your time, Jim. That's all we have for today on this episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast. Do Jim and myself a favor, like, share, and comment this video. Share it with people who might find it interesting, who might find value out of it. And definitely come back and check out our future episodes. You can find all of our episodes on cornerstoneia.com/podcast. And definitely take advantage of your connections and lean on them to best suit you in your life and your professional and personal lives. And Jim, again, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Nick. Have a good day.